Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Motherland, Fort Salem. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So obviously, we're starting off with the interrogation of Nikta, and lo and behold, who shows up, I figured, I was like, oh, is it going to be the VP? Is it going to be the main president? Like, what's going up? Oh, VP, okay, and oh, nope, it's the president too. And it's like, I wasn't told that you were going to be here. She's like, I know. It's like, okay, so like, because I think she was saying like, Petra didn't tell me that you were going to be here. It's like, oh no, that was on purpose. I'm like, yeah. The going behind your back is, I mean, to be fair, it's been in full swing for a while now, but nevertheless, during the interrogation, Nikta straight up like burns and incinerates the interrogator to ash. She's like, oops, sorry, was it something I thought? I will only talk to Tally. And even like, I love when you have Sarah being like, Craven, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. She's like, no, I'm gonna do it. And so it's a really interesting conversation ended up coming out that it's like basically like why Nikta does what she's done. Yes, there's countless citizens I've killed, but every citizen I killed is for every person that has every witch that has died on the front lines of war. And even the president being like, oh my god, and VP's like, there's no way that's accurate, right? Because she was like, do the math. And it's like, I obviously don't agree with what Nikta's done, like her point of view on this situation, but that puts like what the spree has done in perspective of like, yeah, all those mass casualties, like it's like everyone has been methodically planned out because we're trying to make a statement of just like, right, for every one of us that dies on a battlefield for these humans, like these civilians' sake, one of them has to die too, because it's like, you're up here trying to protect these people who would just as quickly turn against you and hate you. Obviously, there's a lot of that already circulating. I mean, to be fair, a lot of that's also on the spree, but it's also like, right, you've done nothing but protect them, but they still lump you together with the spree of just like, it's still that antagonistic approach that they have towards witches in general. But I just thought that was such a fascinating element of realizing like, oh, it's kind of meant for like, one of us falls, it's one of them. Like, I'm not, like I said, I don't agree with it. It's a very extremist way to get your message across, but it's like, it's still like fascinating to know that we've never really had that clarification before, because it just seemed like it was just like, oh, mass casualties, but it's like, no, like there was methodology behind it, that there was precision and purpose behind it. Like, I mean, obviously it was always meant to be a statement and a point, but to know that it was such a very, very specific point that they were trying to make, just thought that was fascinating. But to be fair, I don't always condone what Alder has done over the course of this series, plus the stuff that she's done in the past, especially all this stuff related to Nikta, because especially, like, I just feel bad because she got railroaded, because obviously Tally knew exactly what to say to get what responses out of Nikta she needed to get in front of everybody. And so it's like, right, you can actually thank, not only did Alder do what she did, but by her actions, she basically gave birth to the spree, because she took my work without asking me and used it the way she did, and I took that very work and went off and created a spree. So it's like, you should thank her. She's the origin of the spree, essentially. She gave birth to it. So the president, you know, in that moment, Sarah being like, right, I realize I'm being railroaded, but also realizing in that moment, looking at Tally's eyes, I was like, oh, you planned all this. This was the whole point. So now basically the president is basically going to strip away like her position and everything. Like, you go out on honors, because we can't because if Sarah's truth is exposed to the world, it undoes everything. So it is a political move of, okay, so for the greater good, we're just going to execute Nikta. It's going to be, oh, you're going to go out on top as your victory, which obviously Petra's not too happy about, because it's like, right, the whole point was, well, I don't know how Petra feels about it, but you could tell like how much it's affecting Sarah, because for Sarah, it's like, this is her entire work, like life. She's dedicated. I mean, that's the sad thing too. I mean, to her benefit and her detriment, this been her battle for the past 300 years. Like, all she's done is fight for this country. There's even a point she makes with Petra of like, you might not agree with everything I've done. And yeah, like, you know, because she's like, oh, like, do you like about this whole like spree thing? And she's like, honestly, it went way beyond my control. But at the very least, she was on some Osmandius stuff of being like, oh yeah, like at the very least, it gave us an enemy that we came together to fight. So that's kind of her justification of like, at the very least, yes, it's a thing that spiraled way out of control, but at the very least, I was able to like spin it into something that united us rather than dividing us, and now it's just dividing us more than ever, both witches as well as just, turning the civilians against us. But for her, it's like, how many like battles do you think I've been on? She's like 50. It's like, no, 81. I've been through 81 wars. You have no idea what I've seen. And that's the thing of like, when you've been around this long, living that long, it does make you jaded. I am curious though, because Nicta did point out like, all right, you are around because of the whole biddy thing. You're sacrificing other witches to keep yourself around, which is very like self-centered, self-indulgent. Like, oh, I'm so important. I'm too important to this that I can't be replaced. I have to be around to lead a charge. But it makes you wonder, how does maybe Nicta gets that way because witches, well, I was about to say, because if witches like willingly sacrifice themselves for her, then like, how does that make her any different from Sarah? So she must have found a different outlet. Must have been some other work that allows her to like still be alive after all of this. Well, at least like look the same, like not ages. Like maybe she ages, but not extremely slowly. Obviously, Sarah's like over like 300 years old, but maybe Nicta like, because they talk about that, but I don't remember them specifying like when that whole thing between her and Nicta went down. Like, I don't know if that's like, oh, that was a century ago or whatever. Maybe they specified that, and I just don't remember, like, because I don't know how old Nicta actually is. Once again, you have a general idea of how old Sarah is, but regardless. But even then, like, I think Petra, like, she had it in her mind of villainizing Sarah, but I think like hearing all that made her kind of go like, right, like you are a soldier through and through. Like the fact is, yes, you have seen and been through experiences no one else alive has kind of been through, and you've seen the worst, you've seen the tragedies, you've seen so much death, which can inform and kind of make you very jaded and make you make some very callous decisions from time to time. Like you'll make some decisions because it's like, right, because you're someone who can, to a certain, the argument could be maybe you see the bigger picture because you've been alive so long, but maybe being alive so long has, rather than broadening your viewpoint, it's only narrowed it. Maybe that's an argument. But Petra says like, right, because she was like, Sarah was like, you are ambitious and foolish. She's like, I'm only human, and somewhere along the way you forgot that you were too. So welcome back. And it's just that moment, like I said, it's just everything that Sarah, because also we get into it a little bit later on of why she does what she has done too, because the Mycelium in the form of her mom reaches out to Rael and shows her, it's like, right, I'm the fragment of your mom. That's basically ends up revealing that the Mycelium is basically the life stream from Final Fantasy VII. Like everyone that's dead is dead. Well, all the witches are there, and the reason why that is because Sarah, when she fought back, like the British, like at that time, and she came back, her sister as well as everyone was killed. And in her grief, she used her song, and it's like, right, it gave birth to us. Like it was kind of like that song became the focal point of it. And now, like, that's also why Sarah built Fort Salem here, to be a constant reminder of no matter how long she lives, for her never to forget the death and everything that happened. And it's like, we're here. Like, that's why, like, once again, I figured as much, like, because the Mycelium is like literally a mushroom of death and everything. So I'm like, I figured like all the voices had to be like dead witches, because like they had talked about that before of how Rael's like vocal cords and stuff like that. It's like there's multiple voices in there at once, because she carries inside of her, like, it's basically like she's carrying a fraction of the live stream inside of her, and so like countless witches are inside of her. Like it's like that. But we are like, every time a witch dies, like we come together in this consciousness. That's why I'm here right now. So there's a part of me that's always going to be with you. There's always, well, I guess because even though there's only like a fraction of it inside of her, it's still connected. So she's getting the full, like, all of, like, every witch flows, every dead witch flows through her. Yeah, you even think to a certain extent, it's like, well, Libba's in there as well, or Charvel as well. Every dead witch kind of flows through her in that regard. So, But I think it's so interesting because like I said, in my head, I'm thinking like, well, she only has like a fragment of mycelium. It's like, even though like that bit of the symbiote that is the mycelium touched her, she's still connected to everything that it is. So every witch that's ever died continues in the consciousness that is the mycelium. It all like it still flows through her. She connects to it. So, but that reality of being like, right, Sarah has done everything she's done because of what she's lost. She went through such pain that she never wanted anyone else to kind of go through that as well. And yes, she made mistakes in trying to compensate for that. But once again, she is only human. People are allowed to make mistakes. It's just, she has kind of lived above being a human for so long that it's like she almost tried to play the role almost of a god, of like dictating a lot of stuff, of like try to control so much. But it's like, you're not all powerful. You are like just a human. So there's also the conversation too about the biddy program. It's like, yeah, that's being discontinued as well. So I mean, what I'm curious though is like, I guess that's kind of implying like her biddies, they will stay as they are, but they will, I don't know if that's like all that's going to get untangled like Tally was, but I don't think they can, because like I said, Tally's situation was she was so new of a biddy, they still had time to do that, I think, but given too much time is like there's no reversing it. But I think it's also like your current biddies will live out their lives and die, and then you will too. Like, you can't continue living on forever like you are, because you're no longer in the position that you once were. But Tally realizing that Sarah gets to basically continue living, hiding the truth of what, it's like, no, the whole point of this was for the truth to come out, but it's like, nah, it's kind of getting swept under the rug. And so with that, she confronts Nicta about it, which Nicta's like, I always knew that this circumstance would lead to my death, and I'm fine with it. But the fact of the matter is, it's like, you think, from Tally, it's like, right, we need to stop going at each other's throats. We need to come together and face our true enemy, the Camarilla. But for Nicta, it's still the thing of, I took her out of the position she's in, so at the very least, I'll take that as a victory. Once again, like, she's focusing on that, like, taking out Sarah, it's more of a victory than like, no, we should be coming together against the Camarilla. Even saying her death won't stop everything, because it's like, right, no matter if you kill me, all the leaders, what the Camarilla, what the Spree are and what we represent, it's an ideal. You can't crush that. You can't destroy that, because even if you take off the head of the serpent, another's going to grow in its place. This is like a Hydra, so there's no like quelling an idea that will live on in other people, because she will be a martyr, and like, it will just rise up more upon her death, or just make her into a martyr. So like, that is the detriment. But also like, so it's like, but for Tally, it's just like, no, like, you are a good soldier, granted you went down the wrong path, but it's like, this isn't the way. So she's trying to figure out a way to stop the execution. The situation didn't play out like I thought it was, like, really quickly. I thought what was going to happen is she was going to be like, I thought she was going to do something where she was going to try switch Sarah and Nicta and make it so that Sarah's the one that ends up dying instead of Nicta. And I thought Rael, having seen what she saw, would try and reverse what Tally did, and like, legitimately, and I thought we were going to start like, oh, Tally becomes the new Nicta and Rael becomes the new Sarah, and then like you have Abigail kind of stuck in the middle. I thought, which I think would be an interesting development, like, if they went down this route. Like, that's where my immediate thought was, like, before we even really got to the conclusion of that. But I think that'd be interesting, because if anything, you'd expect Rael and Abby to be the opposite sides of things, with Tally being, because Tally always plays the mediator. She's always been the one kind of torn between the two. So, it's just, I feel like it would have been an interesting, like, turn to their, like, the structure of their relationships in that regard. Like I said, it didn't even go down that route, but still. Some other elements really quickly to go over. We have Adil and Khalida. She doesn't approve of what he did. She's like, oh, you killed and you liked it, but it's like, it was like, no, it wasn't like I enjoyed it, I liked it. It's like, no, it stung with him and it stayed. But for him, it's like, us doing that, like, we have to fight back, because if we don't, like, so many of our people, so many witches have died because of the Camarilla. But for Khalida, it's like, yes, but that's our way of peace. And even saying, like, if we were to die and be wiped out, then so be it. It's like, that's the way things are meant to be. That's the way things are going to go, because I think it's a thing of kind of like, if we participate in war, we're just going to perpetuate, like, fighting begets more violence, begets more fighting type of situation. Even to the point she took the blood from around Adil's neck, because I think it's supposed to represent, like, right, I don't want you to know where I am anymore. Like, I kind of, like, almost just kind of like, it almost seemed like a form of, you're dead to me, brother, because you are no longer of our people. But it's like, it's a thing of, yeah, but like, your need for peace and everything, yes, it's been a part of your teaching and stuff like that, but the world has changed. If you don't change with the world, you're bound to disappear. But for her, like, that's okay, because we won't be part of the problem. But it's like, if you're not part, if you're going to not, but also, like, are you part of the solution as well? Like, are you helping doing what you're doing? Because you're cutting yourself off from the rest of the world by being like, we're going to do our thing, but like, if we die, we die. But like, are you really okay with, like, other witches having to die because you refuse to take? I'm not saying it's an easy solution. I'm not saying like, I'm all about war, but it's a complicated thing of like, this is the way there's this tradition for them to be, pacifist, non-violence, and not join into battle and not kill. But also, it's just the world is falling apart. Like, this great enemy's return to kill all witches. So, I don't think I lean more towards, like, I understand why Adil's doing what he's doing. Like, he was swayed, and I think Khalida, maybe it might involve, like, her eventually, she might die, and that might spur, like, Adil on even more, or maybe Adil will die and that will spur her on, or maybe that make her just double down, being like, right, this would have, yeah, you might have died, but at least we would have been together and not at odds. So that's going to be interesting to see how things kind of go on that front. We have the whole cilla with Rael's dad, and the whole Tiffany thing. Quinn's the one, like, taking her in, and the Dodgers are going to look after her, like, or at least, find her a place to be, taken care of. And even Rael's dad being like, regardless of whatever trouble you in, you're important to my little girl, so that means you're just as much a part of, like, if you're important to my little girl, you're important to me, so you can stay here as long as you need to. Because even Cilla was like, right, does your dad know about who I was? And it's like, yeah, my dad knows not to ask any questions, but other than that, everything's okay. And then there's a giant bird. I'm like, what the hell is that about? And then Cilla shows Quinn later on. She basically took, because at first I was like, is that like, did Nicta leave that? But I'm like, I don't see Nicta doing that. So I think it's just Cilla probably took advantage of that circumstance of probably making it so that witnessing Nicta's work, and she's now taking it for herself to take advantage of it. It's the basic using the birds as a means of doing that Nicta's work. So she's doing that, and now it's going to be their weapon against the Camarilla. So arming themselves in their own right, especially at a perfect time, considering this is a point where everyone, Dodgers, Spree, and army witches have to all come together for this circumstance. So we have all of that going down, and at the obviously the execution, and I thought it was such an interesting thing. Like, right, witches, we're not gonna burn. It'd be that no matter if you were an enemy, you're still a witch. We're not gonna disgrace you. We're not gonna use the tactics that are used against all witches. But it's like there's gonna be 3 strikes to kill you, and that's how the execution works. But Tally stands in the way, and it's like, right, I'll be a proxy of her life. Like, if you want to kill her, then you'll have to kill me. Which Sarah was like, I'm not doing that. I don't want to hurt you, Tally. And she walked away, and then Tally strikes her in the face. But during the battle, Sarah's like, all right, I'm gonna have to do this, because she's like, if you don't want to kill me, then you're just gonna have to tell everyone here the truth about why Nicta is where she is right now, how she became what she became. But then slowly everyone else just becomes a proxy for her. First Rael, then Abigail, then Grigori, then M, and it's like we're all because eventually Tally told all of them the truth about what's really going on with Sarah, and Sarah's kind of confronted with all of this, and it's just kind of like, right, Tally explains the truth of like why we've been in this 20-year war with the Spree and what's going on. This is all on Sarah. Nicta's got to pay for her crimes. Yes, sure, but so does Sarah. And in that moment, just Sarah's like crumbling because it's like, once again, this is like her fight, but it's also like I've dedicated so much of my time and I made mistakes, but I've always tried to do what was best in my own right. I might have been misguided, a little lost along the way, but everything I have done has been for the greater good. But you can also see where the president at one point being like, oh, what about when you got attacked? You made sure not to let me know about it because she didn't want to seem weak in front of anyone. Because if she did, that power could be taken from her. It's like once you've gotten that taste of power, it's hard to kind of give it up. But it's also just like Sarah is confronted with like, right, here you guys are willing to do the right thing when I couldn't, you know? I've had plenty of opportunity to come clean, but I never did. But you guys did, like you're standing up. So you're a symbol of what this is supposed to be. Like I lost what that was supposed to be so long ago. So she ends up saying like, right, you guys are the next generation that hopefully you guys don't make the same mistake I do. Obviously she loses her stripes and she kind of walks away. And, obviously, it's a change coming because it's like, right, we don't need to be like enemies. We don't need to be army versus spree anymore. We need to be witches united against our enemy. So, and I thought it was beautiful that Anacostia came over and touched her shoulder, being like, Sarah, it's kind of like giving her a sign that's okay. I think out of anyone, it needed to be Anacostia to kind of do that. And she just kind of finally let go. So, we'll see what happens to Sarah next going forward with now this information's out there. Like the army as a whole knows that now. It's the public going to find out is the big thing. But obviously for the group, they're celebrating because it's like, right, we've led a new revolution. It's like, you know, what's next? And it's like, right, we prepared to go against the Camarilla because Abigail had already talked to her mom about like being on the front lines, which is like, no, like if I put you on the front lines, then other people are going to see me giving you special treatment. But she's like, no, what they're going to see is you advancing someone who's actually taking out a Camarilla unit. So the fact is that for Abigail, I part of me was wondering whether Petra was actually making an excuse just so her daughter wouldn't have to be on the front lines. Part of me was wondering about that, but it's like, no, recognizing the determination in her daughter, it's like, right, just tell me what you need, daughter, like what you need for me to put together for this like squad to be on the front lines. So preparations are happening on that front. I am curious to see where the president's going, like where all this is going to go. I'm sure that not all of this is going to sit well with the president because she was like, oh, if you don't kill Nicta, we'll handle, like someone else will deal with it itself. So we'll see how that all kind of plays out going forward. Then you had the vice president talking to his daughter. You know, he has come around on the whole situation of like his daughter, you know, for her, it's like, right, she's going to be on camera talking to the public and everything about what's going on, I think. And how much clarity they're going to get on everything that went down, I don't know. Maybe they're going to be completely honest, maybe not. Maybe it's just clarification on, right, the people we need to be worried about are the Camarilla. We've kind of hidden it for so long, but now let's come out front of like, right, all witches, we need to come together. Spree or not, we need to come together for this enemy that's trying to wipe us all out, the real danger. I believe, because notice like, the dude was putting a pin on Penelope. She's like, ow. He's like, oh yeah, sorry. We notice they made sure not to show his face. I'm like, that's got to be the dude from like episode 7, the doctor that was working on Rael. That's got to be him. And like, that's totally, because they made a whole point to like hide his face. If he was just like a regular nobody, why would you? It's like, no, like they set that up on purpose. I immediately expected like Penelope to break out with the witch plague, but then we see later on it's someone else that has the witch plague. Because now the Camarilla are making their strike somehow. Once again, it's just interesting, like how they managed to get here. I guess they came with, like I said, I don't 100% trust the vice president. Now, part of me is wondering, could it be that, well, maybe that wasn't him, but maybe because it's like I expected like the witch plague to start with her because I thought that was him, and that but it's like maybe it's meant to be a thing of like, right, this will protect her from the witch plague because the vice president made a deal with the Camarilla. I don't know. Like I said, just the information they have, I just don't trust him. I believe he's the one that leaked information about Rael. He's like one of the only like, not unless it's someone in his camp, but I don't see that. I feel like it's him specifically, and he's trying to save his daughter. It's like, I'll save her, like, you know. Once again, it's the conversation of, well, what do you do if you have a Tiffany? That whole conversation. We'll see. But yeah, the witch plague got released at the worst place because this thing is Like, it has a life of its own. It senses out witch blood, and a place full of witches, this is the perfect breeding ground for this thing to keep going, and there's no stopping it. But maybe Rael might be the one who'd be able to do it as, like, the Mycelium. I'm curious, like, would it be, like, could the Mycelium, like, how would the witch plague affect the Mycelium? I mean, obviously, like, it was able to fight back for Rael, but that was a little, I think... But even it couldn't, like, fully save her, so it took her mom sacrificing herself, but then it was like, it could repair her afterwards, but... Because I think the witch plague probably attacks at a faster rate than the Mycelium could heal, maybe. But I'm curious about the Mycelium itself inside of the wall of the Mycelium, like, how would the witch plague affect it? Because they are technically, it is a live stream, a fountain of witch subconsciousness and witches. So, but it specifically is tracking the witch's blood. So that's why I'm like, I don't think it would necessarily affect the wall. Maybe it will. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how everything plays out in the season finale. We'll ultimately have to wait and see what ends up happening. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.